Jimmy Lai wins rare court case, but Hong Kong government maintains he used his office space for illegitimate purposes. New rules on electric cars see buyers rushing to put down deposits. And German Chancellor Friedrich Merz tours the Forbidden City before a trip to Hangzhou. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. Former media tycoon Jimmy Lai has won an appeal against a fraud conviction. The Court of Appeal overturned a 2022 ruling that found Lai guilty of breaching the lease terms of the Apple Daily's headquarters. The government said the court's ruling does not change the fact that Lai misused public resources for private purposes. The Department of Justice would consider filing an appeal. Samantha Lee reports.
The two appellants in the case are Next Digital founder Jimmy Lai and former executive Wong Wai-keung. Neither appellant was in court. They were accused of breaching the lease terms of the Apple Daily's headquarters by concealing the operation of Deco Consultants, a consultancy firm directed by Lai in the premises. In 2022, Lai and Wong were found guilty of breaching the lease terms of the Apple Daily's headquarters. Lai was sentenced to 5 years and 9 months imprisonment, while Wong was jailed for 1 year and 9 months. In a judgment delivered on Thursday, the Court of Appeal noted that under the common law, a contracting party generally has no legal obligation to disclose its own breach of contract. Therefore, concealment does not constitute criminal responsibility unless it was made in breach of a duty to disclose. Regarding the prosecution's argument that the lease imposed a duty of disclosure on Apple Daily Printing, the court found no such terms in the document. The court noted that Apple Daily Printing was not the only beneficiary of the deal, as the company invested $520 million to construct the building. The landlord, Hong Kong Science and Technology Park Corporation, stood to gain from the land appreciation. The court found that the prosecution failed to prove why Lai and Wong owe a duty to the corporation to disclose information. The court concluded that the initial trial failed to properly evaluate the criminal intent, leading to the decision to quash the convictions. While Wong has already completed his prison sentence, the 78-year-old Lai remains in custody for separate violations of the domestic national security law, which sent him 20 years behind bars. Following the ruling, a spokesperson for the government said it is an undeniable fact that Jimmy Lai has been abusing Hong Kong's valuable public resources for over 20 years. The spokesperson added the Department of Justice will study the Court of Appeal's judgment in the case to consider appealing the decision. Samantha Lee, TVB News.
Kwok Yin-sung, the father of Hong Kong national security law fugitive Anna Kwok Fung-yi, has been sentenced to 8 months in prison after he was convicted of attempting to deal with funds belonging to a relevant absconder. Kwok's case marked the first sentencing for those charged with such offense. The 69-year-old Kwok Yin-sung, who was earlier found guilty and had been remanded in custody, was escorted to the West Kowloon Magistrates Courts this morning. His daughter, 29-year-old Anna Kwok Fung-yi, is wanted by National Security Police for suspected conspiracy to collude with a foreign country to endanger national security. The senior Kwok was charged with attempting to deal with funds belonging to a relevant absconder after he tried to cash out an insurance policy worth over $80,000 that he purchased for Anna Kwok when she was still young. The insurance policy has belonged to Anna Kwok since she reached adulthood. The defense pleaded with the judge, noting that the father should not be punished for his daughter's fugitive status, adding that it could constitute a case of collective punishment. The defense lawyers cited several money laundering cases, stressing that the judge should consider the amount of funds involved in the case before sentencing the senior Kwok. Acting Principal Magistrate Andy Chang Lam Chi cited the earlier case of Loy Se-yu and emphasized the court's responsibility to punish those committing national security offenses. He added that the purpose of the law is to prevent people from helping to handle absconders' assets, including all assets and not just proceeds of crime. The court stressed no collective punishment is involved in the case and that the sentence has nothing to do with whether the defendant is related to the fugitive. Given Kwok Yin-sung's other offenses, such as forging the fugitive's signature, The judge set 9 months as the starting point of his prison sentence. But the duration was reduced to 8 months after considerations were made regarding his age and lack of prior convictions. After delivering the 2026-2027 budget yesterday, Financial Secretary Paul Chan went to the Legislative Council's Finance Committee to further explain the budget. Some legislators requested the government to restore subsidies for education, social welfare, and healthcare if there is a surplus. Chan responded that government spending should be precise. The government's finances saw a noticeable improvement this year, recording a consolidated surplus of $2.9 billion, with the surplus expected to expand even further over the next 5 years. However, expenditures on education, social welfare, and healthcare will still need to be reduced year by year, while several legislators requested the FS to provide relief measures.
I speak on behalf of the beneficiaries of government spending, and I am left in confusion why there is a cut of our resources. You said the government has to make use of its government reserves, and what if the reserve is depleted?
We have taken into account our fiscal position. Therefore, in the recent few years, we need to cut 2% every year. When it comes to social welfare organizations, the same principle applies.
Some legislators expressed concern about whether the government has considered the impact on the market from the end of the 1-for-1 electric vehicle program. Chan said financial considerations are not the government's focus, adding it will allocate more resources to accelerate the development of e-vehicle charging infrastructure. Though the budget included various tax exemptions, some legislators believe it is still insufficient. Chan said that at this stage, the room for maneuver is relatively limited. To benefit the most people, Chan said he chose to adjust the overall tax exemption. The 1-for-1 replacement scheme for private electric vehicles will no longer be extended upon its expiry date on March 31st. Some car dealerships said residents can still enjoy the tax concessions if they purchase in-stock vehicles before the end of next month. But some lawmakers have expressed concerns that ending the incentive may hinder the growth of Hong Kong's e-car market. Samantha Lee has more.
Exhausted but still working, some car dealerships were handling a surge in orders last night. The unprecedented demand was triggered by the government's budget announcement that the 1-for-1 tax concession scheme will soon come to an end. These car dealerships sold more than 300 electric vehicles in a single day, with staff working until 3 a.m. last night. Eric Wong, CEO of the company, said many residents rushed to make the orders without eating or sleeping. According to the government's blueprint on electric vehicles, the registration of few vehicles will end by 2035. It is estimated there will be more than 290,000 electric cars in 2030. As of last November, there were only 136,000 electric cars in the city, meaning that number have to double within the next 4 years to hit the target. Lawmaker Ben Chan said some e-car brands may lose interest in doing business in the city if sales volumes fall short of their expectations after the waiver is discontinued. Financial Secretary Paul Chan said the decision to end the scheme was not for financial reasons. Over the 8 years of 1-for-1 scheme, the total tax rate has reached nearly $29.4 billion. 2023 saw the highest number of EV purchases, involving $7.4 billion in waived tax. Samantha Lee, TVB News.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz spent the second and final day of his China tour in Beijing's Forbidden City and headed to the Tech Hub of Hangzhou, capital city of Zhejiang Province, with a large group of entrepreneurs. Danny Zhou has the story.
Friedrich Merz is making his first official visit as Chancellor to China that is aimed at resettling relations with Germany's largest trading partner. He is also reported to be the first foreign leader received by President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang during the Spring Festival in the Year of the Horse. Merz told reporters after their Wednesday talks that the Chinese leadership will be making a large order from European aircraft maker Airbus, including up to 120 additional aircraft. A joint statement issued on the Xinhua news agency says both sides are willing to properly resolve their respective concerns through frank and open dialogue. Maz continued his trip on Thursday, starting at the Forbidden City, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, to visit the time-honored complex that had served as China's imperial palace for some 500 years. Later in the day, Maz and his entourage traveled to the Unitary Robotics Company in Hangzhou City. It is one of China's leading robotics firms and has just stunned audience with its humanoid robot performance in the Spring Festival Gala earlier this month. Unitary's founder Wang Xingxing said in an interview that he felt deeply honored to receive the German leader and described the visit as a window for ushering in more cooperation with German companies and promoting the global development of the intelligent robotics industry. Maz is also scheduled to tour around a list of German businesses in China during his stay in Hangzhou. He told reporters that he held successful meetings with Chinese leaders, but acknowledged there are still challenges in bilateral ties, including the problem of overcapacity. In Beijing, the foreign ministry described Maz's trip as fruitful and meaningful, which demonstrates both sides are committed to maintaining a stable and constructive bilateral relationship. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
And still ahead, U.S. industries may be suffering due to rare earth shortages. And U.S. Secretary of State expects no major breakthrough at talks with Iran. Welcome back. Many an industry in the United States is reportedly reeling from worsening shortage of rare earth supplies following China's export curbs, with some aerospace firms taking actions to suspend production. In Beijing, the Commerce Ministry indicated they remain in communication with their U.S. counterparts to prepare for the 6th round of trade talks, which will take place in the near future. According to a Reuters report, industry insiders say 2 of the suppliers to U.S. aerospace and semiconductor companies are turning away some clients. The rare earth shortages center on yttrium and scandium. These elements are essential for defense technology, aerospace and semiconductors, and are almost entirely produced by China. Chinese customs data show, compared with the 333 tons of yttrium shipments to the U.S. last April, only 17 tons of yttrium, with prices jumping about 69 times higher than previously made it to the country 8 months after Beijing implemented stringent export control measures. Meanwhile, the report pointed out the shortage of scandium would weigh on the production of the next generation of 5G chips. Representatives from Iran and the United States are meeting in Geneva for nuclear negotiations. The talks are viewed as a last chance for diplomacy, as Washington has gathered a fleet of aircraft and warships to the Middle East to pressure Tehran into a deal. Daniel Rall tells us more.
With vital talks in Geneva underway, US President Donald Trump wants a deal to constrain Iran's nuclear program, and he sees an opportunity while the country is struggling at home with growing dissent following nationwide protests last month. Iran has maintained it wants to continue to enrich uranium even as its program sits in ruins following Trump ordering an attack in June of last year on 3 of the Islamic Republic's nuclear sites. If another American attack happens, Iran has said all US military bases in the Middle East would be considered legitimate targets, putting at risk tens of thousands of American service members. Iran has also threatened to attack Israel following a bruising 12-day war last year, meaning a regional war again could erupt across the Middle East. There would be no victory for anybody. It would be a devastating war, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told India Today in an interview filmed on Wednesday just before he flew to Geneva. Speaking to reporters in Basseterre, St. Kitts and Nevis, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the negotiations are aimed at addressing Iran's returning nuclear weapons program, but there are major concerns about its conventional missiles as well.
Know that Iran poses a very grave threat to the United States and has for a very long time. They are in possession. First and foremost, after their nuclear program was obliterated, they were told not to try to restart it, and here they are. You can see them always trying to rebuild elements of it. They're not enriching right now, but they're trying to get to the point where they ultimately can. The other thing I would point you to, however, is that Iran possesses a very large number of ballistic missiles, particularly short-range ballistic missiles that threaten the United States and our bases in the region and our partners in the region. And all of our bases in the UAE, in Qatar, in Bahrain. And they also possess naval assets that threaten shipping and try to threaten the U.S. Navy.
Iran has said it hasn't enriched since June, but it has blocked inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency from visiting the sites bombed by the U.S. General TV News.
U.S. Justice Department said it was reviewing whether it had improperly withheld documents from the Jeffrey Epstein files after several news organizations reported that some records involving the accusations made by women against President Donald Trump were not among those released to the public. The purported missing files were summaries of interviews the FBI conducted with an unidentified woman who came forward after Epstein's 2019 arrest and claimed to have been sexually assaulted by both Trump and Epstein when she was a minor in the 1980s. Meanwhile, former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers will resign from teaching at Harvard University amid a campus review of his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. In a statement, Summers said it was a difficult decision and thanked the students and colleagues he had worked with over 50 years. But Harvard students are mostly glad to see him leave.
As an intending economics student myself, we'll miss his research, but we won't miss the personal life he led, and we won't miss the taint he left on this university. So ultimately, I think I'm a bit relieved. I would be very worried if I had to take a class from this professor, even though he has significant expertise within the field I'm looking to go into.
I do hope there'll be a continued investigation into all the money that went into Harvard from Epstein, and I just hope that the impact of that will be that students see that the administration is committed to taking it seriously.
U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer noted Washington is to retain its current tariff rate on Chinese goods and will continue the Section 301 investigations into China's compliance with the Phase 1 Economic and Trade Agreement. Beijing pledges to take all necessary measures to firmly safeguard its legitimate rights and interests if Washington insists on advancing the investigation or imposes tariffs or other restrictive measures. Greer spoke to media on Wednesday that even if the Trump administration imposes 15% or higher levies on some trading partners, China will still be slapped with a U.S. tariff of 35 to 50% set under the trade agreement earlier inked between the two countries. Greer added that unfair trade practices under Section 301 of the U.S. Trade Act of 1974 would be centerpiece of the administration's investigations, which will be targeting industrial overcapacity, forced labor and supply chains, as well as discrimination against U.S. tech firms. In response, the Commerce Ministry in Beijing urged the U.S. side to refrain from shifting blame and to avoid using China as a pretext to create trouble or provoke issues. A group of residents of Wangfu Court have sent a letter to the government hoping to return to their apartments as soon as possible to collect their belongings. The government anticipates that residents can return to their buildings as early as the end of April. Meanwhile, the latest budget proposed to allocate $4 billion for the long-term housing arrangements of residents of Wangfu Court in Tai Po, excluding Wangshi House, which was not damaged by the earlier fire. Some legislators have raised concerns about the government's financial arrangements should be more than half of the residents of Wangshi House want the government to acquire it. Lawmaker Tang Ka-piu said more than 70 such residents have contacted him, hoping the government will consider including Wangshi House in the resettlement and acquisition scheme. Deputy Financial Secretary Michael Wong said the government hopes that when residents of Wangshi House reach a high degree of consensus, then the administration can work together with them, which would involve nearly $1 billion. Wong said the government will go back to the Legislative Council to go through the procedures, but there is no need to worry about insufficient cash. And that's in the news. Thanks for watching.